Hi, I'm Dave Bryce from Music Player Network, and we are here with Benhamou of the Musical Box here in sunny Agora, California. Ian is going to take us on a little tour of the rig that he's using on the current Musical Box tour. Ian, why don't you show us what you got going on here?
All right, so welcome to my spaceship here. I guess we'll start in order. Got a Hammond L 100, which was provided to us by Kenridge Sounds, thanks to Mr. David Bryce over here. Sure. With some custom modifications on it. Mainly, there's 2 1/4-inch outputs on it, so that one could run to the mixer, which then routes to the Leslie 147, which is over there. And the other one runs through the pedal board, which is on the floor. I don't know if you can see it there, but there's an old chorus, bass chorus ensemble, and an MXR Phase 100, as well as an MXR flanger. Because at one point, Tony Banks got rid of his Leslie and ran everything through those pedals to simulate kind of a Leslie effect. So this way I have 2 different lines running at the same time, and they both get mixed, and depending on the song, I have presets where I have the Leslie on, or I mute the Leslie and I unmute the direct line with the effects.
So you really pretty much go out of your way to duplicate not just the instrumentation, but the actual audio path, effects, Leslie routing, and not just the routing, the actual pedals themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Using the real gear, because I mean, look, the Musical Box is all about being as authentic and as precise as possible with not just the playing, but also all the tones, all the parts, and that's why having all this old vintage gear to reproduce using exactly what Tony Banks used. And there is quite a difference. I mean, the direct organ sound into a Leslie,
Yep.
So very typical kind of organ sound, right? But direct, for the later stuff starting in 77, you have a completely different sound. And that's direct running through the pedals. So you see it's bypassing the Leslie, it's going just into the PA directly. And it's a completely different sound.
Right. So this is an L series Hammond.
L100, which is what Tony Banks used in the early days. He eventually moved to a T.
That's transistor one.
Which is a transistor, pretty much the same organ, but with transistors. But the presets are not quite the same. And these tab presets are pretty important for certain songs. If I go back to, for example, you have that, or even more iconic than that is "Dancing with the Moonlit Night."
Is the reverb coming from the organ?
The organ is coming. There's a spring reverb tank in it, and you have 2 tabs: Reverb 1 or Reverb 2.
Wow, cool.
Or you could put both of them on. That's what I call Reverb 3. So you have just like a shorter reverb, a longer one, and the full is the 3. And so you play with that throughout. And there's another preset that's common is the trumpet, which you'll hear also in Fountain of Analysis, the beginning. Then you could also just have the drawbars active, which I use sometimes, and full organ, which is just basically all the drawbars out. Essentially. So anyway, so that's the organ. Mm-hmm. Also use some of the bass pedals for certain songs. There are parts of the show where our Sebastian, the Mike Rutherford of the band, can't play the bass pedals or doesn't have the right tone on his rig, so I'm covering certain parts. So yeah, so that's the organ. Then you have the ARP Pro Soloist, which was the main synthesizer Tony Banks used in the early days. Mainly things like Cinema Show. It's actually not the right sound, it's more like this. Or something like Firth of Fifth. You take off the delay. So that, and it's
never really noticed that octave tone in there.
Well, there's an overdub on it, so he tracked it once, and then he added an octave above track. So what I'm using is a POG 2 with the different presets to use to try and simulate some of those overdubs. Sometimes it's an octave under, sometimes an octave up, sometimes it's both.
Ian, let me take a minute to ask. I remember you telling me before that you weren't like a huge Genesis fan growing up. Plugging into this to get that detail that you got on the sounds and stuff, did they give you notes on the sonics, or did you just study like a mother? Or
it's a bit of both, but I mean, Musical Box has been around for 26 years, and it's true that I wasn't an early Genesis fan growing up, but I did see the Musical Box play maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Dave Myers?
Dave Myers was the keyboard player at the time, monster keyboard player. And I was blown away. And ever since then, I became a fan. So I did know the material very well. But also, you know, they've been around for 26 years. They own all this gear. When you jump into the seat, you got all the charts are already written out. And, you know, they're aware of what tones were used on what songs, what even the presets. That's this preset with an Echoplex, you know, delay or slapback or whatever. So you're well surrounded, and you know you're not starting from ground zero. Or else it would have taken me 2 years to learn not only all the parts, but then learning how to manipulate all the gear and how to find all the right sounds.
Thanks. All right, for that, I didn't mean to interrupt what you were doing.
Yeah, so the ARP is running through a MXR Echoplex pedal, because a real tape Echoplex would be great, but it's not working right now. So I'm using just a pedal just to get a little slapback effect, short delay. And then you have the mother of all mothers, the ARP 2600 here, which is beautiful right over here with all the bit of patching, running through a real Roland RS-201, RE201, Space Echo.
Space Echo, of course.
Let me dial up a patch that has that. So that's a lot of the sounds on Wind and Wuthering, and then there were three. Is this? And yeah, so that's basically it with the delay of the tape delay, and you know I basically have it patched one way for the whole show, and I just play with these sliders to mix in and out some of the different oscillators to get different tones. But it's pretty much set to one sound for most of the set.
Well, most of his stuff is gated anyway, so it makes it a little bit easier. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not real intense envelopes on or anything. It's bap.
No, not even. I'm not even using the ADSR. I'm using the AR. I bypassed the ADSR just to have a basic attack and release. Because I mean, the Tony Banks' sounds are their lead sounds. They're pretty simple. There's not a lot of modulation going on.
Sure. Yeah.
He uses just a bit of effects, like a delay effects and reverb, and that's it. And it works. So that's it, and then we'll turn over to this side. You have, of course, the heart of the Genesis sound is the Mellotron.
Yes, sir.
M4000D, which is a replica of an M400, but all digital. Yeah, so M4000D, it's an exact replica of the M400 in terms of the action and the panel, but digital samples. And you have all the sounds of the Mellotron and Timberland loaded in. Whereas on a real M400, you would only have 3 tape sets that you'd have access to, so you'd be more limited. And because we're covering multiple eras, I do need to have different sounds, not just the strings, but the choirs and the flutes, and sometimes church organ and accordion, depending on the song, even brass for certain songs. So just to have a little demo, the classic violin sound. Also have choirs. The flute, and sometimes there's some of those parts. They're layered. They're done with organ chords and the choirs. And because I only have one hand, because the other hand is playing synth, so what we do is I load up the church organ patch as well, and I kind of mix it in to get a little bit of an organ sound in there. Kind of works.
For what song would you use that on, for example?
Well, for example, right there, that's Cinema Show. So, what's the sound I'm using for that? So, would just be one example.
So when Banks is doing it live, how does he do it then?
I think he's just using the choir sound.
And it just doesn't bother with you with the organ.
Because I mean, he didn't have the option of doing that. He was using an M400, so sure. I doubt he had the church organ tapes that loaded in. So yeah, I mean, live they have compromises, but us, because we have a little bit of modern technology, we're able to maybe, you know, come closer to the studio versions a little bit more. That's also running through a Holy Grail pedal right there, just to have a little bit of a reverb. Because you know, and I mix it in and out. That's why it's there. So sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's got the reverb.
Okay.
Pianette, Honor Pianette Model N.
N?
Model N, yeah. That's what he used,
right
the
on.
wooden one. Which is basically, I don't think there's much difference between that and a T, except
yeah.
for the casing maybe, and maybe the number of notes. This one is customized to have a built-in fuzz, because Tony Banks used it as a fuzz pedal. There was a short period of time before Steve Hackett came in the band where they were just a 4-piece. and therefore Tony Banks was doing guitar solos because Mike Rutherford was busy playing bass pedals and rhythm guitar. So he started plugging his piano into a fuzz to do some like guitar-like solos. For example, the musical box. It's a pretty noisy fuzz. So, but. That and maybe Fountain of Samasis you'll recognize. So it's pretty noisy because it's an old fuzz and it's built in with the pickup system.
It's supposed to be noisy.
But it's, it brings a level of authenticity, I guess. And that's always running through the Leslie because at the time that was his amp. He was always running everything through the Leslie.
All these cells. So there's a whole routing scheme that takes all these things through the Leslie.
Exactly. That's why we have the mixer. That's what he did. He ran his rig into a mixer, and then he'd have one output for direct and one output for the Leslie, and he would play with it. Because sometimes the Mellotron is running through the Leslie, sometimes the ARP is running through the Leslie, sometimes stuff is running direct. His acoustic guitar, the 12-string, is often running through the Leslie as well. So you have to be able to play, duplicate that on the fly. So that's why I have the Kurzweil and the DM1000.
Right, I noticed the Yamaha changing volumes and things as you're changing patches.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is routed into that, and I have presets for every song. In fact, I have even multiple presets for certain songs, and everything gets controlled through here, just a simple MIDI call. And if you look at the sliders, they'll be moving around. Separate mix, different EQs for every song. This way we get as close to the originals as we can. And save it, and
This is the great thing about coming into an existing band is the body of work was there for you for
the
most part.
Yeah, although we introduced these two pieces to be able to do that because at first it was an analog board, but I was like, it's just too much manipulation.
I think the first time I saw the box was like an RD100 or RD1000 in the rig.
Very possible, yeah. Back in the day, and I think they upgraded to a Roland A90 at one point, with samplers. For piano, everything was on samplers, but
This is more fun.
Over the years, you upgrade. There's a great thing about the Kurzweil. So I didn't get to it, but here's the Kurzweil PC3K8. We usually have a PC3X8, but we're on backline because it's a very short tour, a leg of tour we're doing in Southern California, so we don't have our whole rig. We just brought in the essentials.
The same thing, except that it's a sample board.
Yeah, exactly. And anyways, I just loaded all my patches, so it's the exact board that I wanted.
Think about the Kurzweil architecture.
But one of the great things about about this is that I'm able to play two-handed piano parts with one hand. For example, in Stagnation, I have an organ solo. But while I'm doing that, there's a piano accompaniment, which is it's a two-handed accompaniment. But I'm able, with clever mapping, I'm able to do. See, I have like bass octaves over there. Of course, I mean, that's all I could play on. I can't play anything else but that. It's programmed to work just for that song because it's a simple chord change. But with the two together, and so on and so forth. And
mapped multiple notes to a single.
Yeah,
stroke.
exactly. See, I have chords running and octaves here. So even this is supposed to be an A minor chord, but see, I just play it with my thumb flat, and I'm able to.
I love that about the Kurzweil.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have also, one of the coolest things we did was in Ripples. Ripples has this amazing two-handed piano part in the chorus. Has to be played with two hands. But there's also this, underneath it all, sustaining the whole thing is this chord progression. So of course there was no way of doing that, but without it, it just felt kind of hollow. So what we did is I found I took an organ sample from the Kurzweil, disabled the Leslie, and mapped chords to single notes.
Oh, so this is not the KB3.
So
this
then,
is basically just some of the samples that are in there.
Yeah, it's just a simple, I think 4 drawbars out sample. But by disabling the Leslie and then running through that alternate output, I'm able to have the piano running direct and the organ sample to the Leslie.
Oh, how cool.
And so I turn it on with the mod wheel here. And I mapped octaves to the lower hand to be able to play the octaves.
Excellent.
So when you put it all together, it's the whole thing.
That's excellent.
And it sounds
I love
full.
the little organ changes underneath.
Yeah, the whole.
Yeah, you totally missed that if that wasn't there. There's
Yeah,
no
exactly.
question about
And
it.
it's mapped to notes that make no sense harmonically. It's like Ds. But those are notes that I'm not playing anywhere else. So you find a hole where you're able to just voice it. And it works. It works great. It sounds like two keyboard players are playing, but there's just only one. So yeah, that's the beauty about the Kurzweil being able to do that. Other than that, it's used almost exclusively for piano. And then the last piece here is the Roland RS-202 string machine, which came into Tony's Banks rig in the late 70s. We're using it only for one song on this tour, and that's Down and Out, the famous intro. Open up the filter here. That's it. So that's it. That's the whole rig. I also have a 12-string guitar, which was running through the Leslie for a couple
Supper's
songs.
Ready and Cinema Show.
Supper's Ready, Cinema Show, also Musical Box, and Entangled. But Entangled, it's running into a phaser pedal, not the Leslie.
Excellent. How many more dates do you have in the show?
This is our last California date. We're coming home tomorrow. We're off for the Christmas holidays, and then we start playing in locally Montreal, Quebec, Toronto, early January, and finishing the tour, going to England and East Coast, United States, Midwest, all the way until end of June.
So most of the times that I've seen the musical box, it's been the Gabriel stuff. There was that. I know that there was that one dip into the Collins era with the Trick of the Tail tour.
Right.
But this is really a departure for what the musical box did, in that this is not an exact replication, song by song, set piece by set piece, with Dennis doing all of the speeches that Peter Gabriel would have done.
Yeah.
I know this is the second time you guys have done this as well. You did the one where we saw you last year doing the older stuff, and this is moving on more towards the later Collins era stuff.
That's right. So the musical box got their thing was that they always recreated a specific tour the way Genesis did it in the early days. So if they were doing the Selling England by the Pound show, it was the exact set list, the same decor, the same rig, the same look, the same costumes of Peter Gabriel as Genesis did it. So it was an exact replica of that show all the time.
Genesis guys gave them a whole bunch of that stuff.
Exactly.
Right?
They gave them access eventually to multi-tracks and to some of the decors and the projections. So then when you do the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, same thing. We're doing the Lamb Lies Down show the way Genesis did it in 74, 75, note for note. After 25 years of doing the same thing, there's only so many tours when Peter Gabriel was a singer. There's only 3 or 4 tours you could play, so it's always the same show.
Right.
And being huge Genesis fans, they wanted the opportunity to play, more obscure track, deeper album cuts. But if you're stuck to recreating a specific show, you can't do that.
Let's talk a little bit about how you guys chose the songs that you're doing for the tours.
So that's the thing. So this tour, after 25 years, they allowed themselves the liberty of creating their own kind of dream set. And we started with the Genesis Extravaganza Part 1 last year. So it was divided into 3 parts. You had the first part, which was Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering. The second part of the show was excerpts from The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And then the last part was all early stuff. So obviously, we still wanted to do the big classics. So Cinema Show, The Musical Box, First the Fifth were still in the set. But an opportunity to do deeper album cuts that even Genesis never performed live. Stuff like After the Ordeal or 7 Stones, Timetable, Can Utility in the Coastliners, Blood on the Rooftops.
Amazing.
Yeah. See, that's a song that also never got really performed live because that was the last album that Hackett was on. I don't think it was part of that Seconds Out era tour. And then Hackett left, so obviously they dropped that song. It never became part of the show. So we wanted to, the people who come see our shows, they're real fans. They know the albums, they know the songs. So they know these songs, even though they're deeper album cuts. And it was an opportunity for them to hear some of the songs that either first of all, were never performed by Genesis, or rarely. And us also had never performed them because we were stuck to reproducing exact set lists the way Genesis did it in the 70s.
So to the current tour, did you get to pick any of the songs that you guys are doing?
No, I mean, we brainstormed together, but obviously, I mean, the band leaders and the upper management, they make the final call. But yeah, we had some input, and so we removed the Lamb section for for Extravaganza Part 2, and we expanded the 2 other sections. So now we're delving a little bit into, and then there were 3 by doing Down and Out. Only 1 song. I don't think we're going to go any further than that. And, we took out Blood on the Rooftops, but we added an 11th Earl of Mar, and Ripples is in the set now, and just expanding that section, and expanding the second section as well, which is all the early Gabriel stuff, by doing stuff from Trespass, and some deeper cuts from Foxtrot, and etc. And Nursery Crime as well.
And how many bands get to encore with Suckers Ready? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 23-minute encore. I think a lot of people, you get the sense every time we come out for the encore that people are they're hoping that it's going to be Suppers, but they're like, there's no way they're going to play a 25-minute encore, 1 song.
Wrong.
Wrong. We come out and we don't even say a word. We just come on and we start playing it, and it works. I mean, what better way to end a show than with Supper's Ready? The most epic of all epic symphonic big prog rock tunes,
One of my absolute favorites, and certainly one of the reasons that was drawn so far into prog and Genesis in my early years.
Yeah.
Ian, I want to thank you for taking the time to
pleasure.
show us around. Once again, I'm Dave Bryce with the Music Player Network, and Ian Benhamou from the Musical Box. If they're coming to a theater near you, make sure and see them, and if they're not, go search them out and see them. Thanks so much.